Hello, today's story is called The Helpful Servant. Naaman was a soldier. Not just any soldier, he was the commander of the whole Syrian army. He was a very powerful man, and he was afraid. Naaman, you see, was ill. His skin was covered in sores, and he couldn't feel his fingers or his feet. No one knew how to make him well. Everyone felt sorry for him, and God felt sorry for him too. Look, can you see? He's covered in sores. So God whispered to a little girl who'd been captured by Naaman's army and carried away from God's promised land. She worked for Naaman's wife, and one day she said to her mistress, "Back in Israel, where I come from, there lives a man called Elisha. God uses him to make sick people well. If only Naaman could go and see him." And before long, the great soldier who'd fought against God's people was off to seek help from God's prophet. Naaman didn't go alone. He took his servants, he took his horses, and a chariot full of treasure to reward Elisha in case his cure should work. Look, can you see some of the sparkly jewels that he took along? And some of the gold coins. It was a grand parade, and Naaman expected a grand greeting in return. But when he sent one of his men to knock on Elisha's door, the prophet didn't even answer. Instead, he told his servant Gehazi to say, "If you want to be well, go and dip yourself 7 times in the River Jordan." Now, it may be that Naaman was tired and frustrated, or it may simply be that he was proud. Whatever the reason, the prophet's message made him angry. "The Jordan River," he shouted. "It's filthy. I'll throw myself into any river in Syria, but I will not stick one toe in the River Jordan. Nor will I take the advice of a man who cannot even be bothered to meet me." "Begging your pardon, sir," mumbled one of Naaman's servants, "but if the prophet had sent you to do something hard, you'd have gone straight away, wouldn't you?" "Well, of course," grunted Naaman. "Any soldier would." "Well then, why can't you go and do something easy, like washing in the river? It can't hurt, and it might just work." Naaman sighed. "All right," and he led his men to the river. He dipped himself twice. Nothing. He dunked himself twice more. His skin was as ugly as ever. Twice more, and still no cure. Naaman was getting angry. But when he came up for the 7th time, spluttering and shaking water from his face, Naaman's men let out a cheer. Naaman opened his eyes and looked at his hands. The sores were all gone on his body. Gone from all over him. Naaman dressed and hurried back to Elisha's house. The prophet himself answered the door this time, and Naaman could not contain his joy. "Take this treasure, take it all. For you have saved my life." But Elisha said no, for it was God after all who'd healed Naaman. "All right then," said Naaman, scooping up a pile of earth. "Let me take this with me, so that I can stand on a piece of your land and worship your God too." Elisha nodded and smiled. And God smiled too, for with a little girl and a muddy river, he had turned an enemy into a friend.